Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today started with an alternative Disney apparel brand for the punk at heart. You can say it's nostalgia meets rebellion. Please welcome the co-founder of Flying House Threads, Scott. What's going on, Scott? How you doing, man?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well.
Good.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me and during a lunch break. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What's your go-to lunch or sandwich?
Oh man, that's tough. I should have known right off the bat this would be a question. I actually don't eat meat.
Okay.
So I would say honestly, like the last sandwich I had was peanut butter and jelly.
Okay.
Honestly, I mean
That's a
they're
good
good.
one.
If you haven't had one in a while,
Yeah.
peanut butter and jelly.
All right. So I'm going to ask a jelly question first. So what kind of jelly is it? Is it jam, preserve? What is it?
It's not.
Strawberry, grape.
It's strawberry. So I know it's
Okay.
strawberry, and it's like the preserve. So it's actually got chunks of
Yeah,
strawberry in
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I do
All right.
the real deal. You
Okay.
know.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and obviously it's called lunch with Biggie. It's not sandwiches with Biggie. So what is a typical lunch then for you if you're not eating, obviously eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
People are going to be really bored with this. So most of the time, my go-to lunch, especially like when I'm at the firehouse or something like that, is I cook up rice, I roast broccoli, put some seasoning on that, and then pan fry some tofu.
Okay.
And then I
Okay.
think I put like Yoshidas. It's all about the sauce, really, for me.
Yep. Yep.
So I'll put Yoshidas on there. Sometimes I went through a big sweet Thai kick.
Okay.
So I was really into that sweet, spicy kind of flavoring.
Yep.
But that's my go-to. But I don't really have a go-to lunch. I would say the most consistent one is that one when I'm at work.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
that makes total sense. That makes total
not
sense.
very exciting.
No, I mean that's kind of how. Listen, in the day-to-day life, people think like they're like, oh, you must eat a sandwich. I eat leftovers. I eat everything. I don't eat sandwiches for every meal. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I also know that I know how it is on a day-to-day, especially since you're very similar to me in that aspect. You have full-time job, and then you also run a
Hmm.
clothing brand on the side. So it's not like
And we have a toddler.
yeah, and you have a toddler. So there you go.
Yeah.
It just adds to it.
Yeah.
It definitely adds to it. All right, so tell people about and obviously I did the intro, but tell people how you guys came up with the idea to start Flying House Threads.
So that one sparked from basically during the lockdown in COVID. And leading up to that, I was always seeing different Disney themed brands like the Lost Bros or other ones out there.
Yep.
For me personally, I was like, how do they have such a huge following? I personally don't like think their shirts are that good.
Okay.
So I was kind of always like, well, if they could do it maybe someday, because I had an idea in my head, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be like just photography or if we were going to do some sort of clothing brand. And then the lockdown happened and I was bored. So I started drawing and I came up with like, because we started out doing like surf kind of skate Disney things. And so I
Yeah.
drew a Lilo and Stitch surf shop, like Ron John surf
Yeah.
shop.
Yeah.
And so I drew that up and I sat on that for a while and I was like, well, why don't we just make some shirts for our Disney friends? Because we have a lot of friends that are into that. So we printed those up and I don't know, it was like 12, 15 people. We made t-shirts and hoodies. So we sold like 20 things, but we just sold them at cost, like whatever we paid to have them printed at
Yeah.
whatever print
You
shop.
just wanted it was one of those where you wanted it and you're like, well, and I have other people that want to wear it, so let's
Exactly.
just do it for
Yeah.
myself. Totally
Exactly. Yeah. I thought it looked cool because
Yeah.
at this point too, we still weren't like, oh, we're going to make this a brand. I was just
Yeah.
like, that's a cool design. It's something that I would wear because not a lot of the things inside the Disney park, like you wear their stuff inside the park, but when you're out of the park, you don't necessarily want to wear a giant Mickey,
Correct.
whatever thing. So we did that, sold a bunch of things, and I was like, kind of feeling those creative juices, and ideas were flowing. The second one we did was like Walt, but looked like the Vans logo.
Okay.
Sold more of those, same thing. And then it was like we sold 30 hoodies and t-shirts to our friends. And I was like, okay, well, we're bored. We're in lockdown. Let's just start a brand. Let's start up making something. So we started an Etsy site. And I think still at this point, we were like, we're just going to kind of do this and not really thinking it was going to turn into anything.
Yeah.
Um, but then we came up with like a ghost host social club
Yeah.
thing, and then I kept having ideas coming. Like it kind of sparked my love for like art and being creative. Um, and so from there, we just kept designing and pushing. And then finally, at a certain point, I was like, I think something's here, like a surf skate kind of alternative. There's not much of that out there on the industry. There's a couple brands that kind of do something similar. Some are a little bit darker, some are a little more lighthearted. So we wanted to try to stay true to that vibe. And then I think it took us like 2 weeks to think of a name. My wife and I were kicking one back and forth, and had our Etsy page, started a name, and then took off from there.
All right, so I got questions. I got some questions.
I'm all
One
about it.
one is, so when you started going and doing like the hoodies and doing t-shirts right off the bat, was
Yeah,
it one of those things where like your friends were like, "Hey, I take that in a hoodie," or you just, and then did you have one was like, did you, when you designed it, cuz I think you're similar to me in the aspect that I'm a doodler as well, so like I
yeah,
can envision it, I draw it, but I'm not an artist, so I'm not putting it on like I'm not making it on, I'm not putting it on Photoshop
yeah,
and creating it. So did you
yeah.
have designer friends that you went to and said, "Hey, out of curiosity, can you make this for me?" Or and then take it to a printer? Or how did you go about it the first time around? Was it something like a DTG thing, or you actually had a local printer and you actually had someone print it?
Yeah, so the very first, the Lilo and Stitch one, I hand drew that, and then we picked like a local, like, you have a birthday party and you want
Yeah.
5 t-shirts, so they did direct to garment on those. Um, but then I actually worked with a dude for the second print, the Walt one that we did. I worked with a guy that actually had a screen printing press
Okay.
and heater and all that stuff
Yeah.
in his garage. So I actually learned how to do all the screen printing with the emulsion and making
Yeah.
screens and doing all that. So I did that initially for the second one. And then by the time we started, I was like, okay, if we're going to make this a brand, um, and kind of to go back, I'm a hoodie person. Like
Yeah.
I have a serious problem with hoodies, and I think everything should be on a hoodie. And if people are like, I want a zip up, I'm like, no,
No,
it's all
hoodie.
about hoodies, no
Yeah.
crew necks.
No, I love it. Love it.
That's how I was like, we're going to do hoodies and t-shirts because we live in the Pacific Northwest. It gets cold here, it rains.
Yep.
So hoodies. So once we started being like, we're going to make this a brand, right from the get-go, I was like, okay, if we're going to make this a brand, I want to make it as top quality as we can and have the best products that we can. So it actually took me a little while to find that tri-blend t-shirt that we use. And then I went through 6 or 7 different styles of hoodie, like literally just ordering them, not printing anything on them,
Yep. The
and figuring
samples.
out like, yeah, how they shrunk, like
Yep.
after you
Yep.
washed them, like
Yep.
all those things, because I wanted to be as top as possible.
I
And
feel you,
then,
man. You're speaking my language. This is
yeah,
exactly everything I've tried to done.
yeah,
So I totally feel you.
yeah. And then the screen printing, in my opinion, and I think other people in the industry, there's like vinyl cricket, which is like kind of down here, and then you have direct to garment, which is a little there, and then you have screen printing. And so with all of it, I was like, if we're starting a brand, we're gonna have the best t-shirts we can have, the best hoodies we can do, and we're going to screen print. So everything right off the bat is as good as it can be, which uh, cost us uh, a lot in the beginning. So
Mhm.
when we started, we were actually losing money, but we're thankfully in a position that this isn't my full-time job. So we weren't relying on this money, and
Yeah.
we could foot that, which I think if anybody's kind of starting out, that's the hard part, right? Is like you're not going to be making money, and you've got to get past that point, you know?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
Um, Flying House Threads. The
yeah.
name. Is it? I have a theory, so I'm like, where did
Oh,
it come from? A Disney movie, or did it, or
yeah,
is it? Is that where it came from? Is that
yeah,
so? And I'm assuming that, but I'm just kind of
yeah.
curious, like where
Okay,
the name, where you hit the, how did the name come about?
okay. So, uh, again, I'm meticulous and crazy about things. And when I was researching some of the top brands that were doing this, you have the Lost Bros. There was 100 Acre Hood. Glad Racket. So I was like, okay, it seems like the top, and this has gone way above and beyond. Seems like the top have like a three syllable
Yeah,
type thing. So we were like, okay, we want to think of something that's like that. We want to be Disney, but we don't want it to be obvious Disney.
correct.
Um, because maybe someday we'll branch off. Who knows, right? So we
Yeah,
wanted to leave an option open for that. But we tossed a lot of things around, like Flix Designs was one. My wife was adamant about, and I was like, no, we're not going to do Flix Designs. Like, doesn't feel right. And I think at the time we were actually watching Up. Uh, and that's one of our favorites. And my wife compares me to Carl because I'm kind of a grumpy old man at times. And so we were like, okay, something with Up. What can we do with Up? And I was like, okay, a house, this. And just through talking and hashing things out and writing things down, we came out with Flying House Threads, which is that three syllable. And then from there, you're like, okay, visually, we can make like a cool looking image and have stacked text and just really diving into like
yeah.
the really minute details of a brand. Yeah.
Well, and obviously, I would say even more so because that's one of the things I love. So, few things like you mentioned, you live in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
I live in Orlando, Florida. So obviously, I live where the mouse. I'm actually like I don't live near the mouse, but I'm close enough to the mouse. But I live in
Yeah.
Orlando, so I'm still a 45-minute drive to see Mickey and his friends.
Yeah.
And so. But that's one thing that I loved, especially when I had a young. You said, yeah, I know you have a toddler. For me, obviously, my kid grew up, got going to the park, and that was my favorite thing to
Awesome.
do because
Yeah.
I love the details of all the meticulous details that come in with the rides and all those things. So I've been a huge fan of. I've been following you guys for a while. I know
Yeah.
you
It's
guys
been
have
a
been.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it is
Yeah.
because I feel like I felt like some camaraderie in the sense that I feel some of the things that you guys deal with in the sense that one, you're like, same idea. Like I doodle all my ideas, but I do work with some designers. I work with designers to do stuff. I do local print. I believe in top quality stuff. And so like I love seeing what you guys have created and what you're doing. And so I think that it's been a lot of fun. And I know you and your wife Morgan are the ones that run the brand. You have other people that kind of help with that. Are you both? And I kind of know the answer, but I'm still going to ask because a lot of people would probably may assume something like this. Are you both big Disney fans?
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of similar to you. I'm a military brat, but part of my life I grew up in California, in Air Force Base over there. So my dad loved Disney. We were in California. We went to Disneyland all the time. So I grew up on Disney. And I think I kind of like I'm 40 now. So I grew up kind of in the heyday of Disney where you had all the VHS and then they were starting to come out with Aladdin, Blind King, all those. So I grew up loving the Disney movies and going to Disneyland in particular. My wife, born and raised in Oregon, she liked Disney. She knows the movies. I don't think her passion for it runs quite as deep as mine. But I've talked to her about it. She really likes going to the park, but what she really likes to see is how excited and passionate I get about the parks. And like, um, I was talking to somebody recently, and I think as far as like Disney adults and things go, there's different levels, right?
Yeah,
There's some that really like Walt Disney World, some that like Disneyland, some that are really into the movies. Like, there's all these different categories of Disney adult. I am not one that could really like rattle off specific facts about movies and, oh, this character actually appears and this one is a
yeah,
little like I can't do that. Like, people tell me I kind of remember those, but I don't know 'em. My passion for the park, because I'm kind of a history nerd, and for some reason I dove into Disneyland history, and the Disney company. So my passion for Disney really is like the Disneyland park and the history of Disneyland and how it came about and how his company came about and everything he went for. And I just think it's kind of a cool story because, uh, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to do Snow White." And people are like, "You're going to bankrupt your company." And he's like, "Watch me." And crushes it with Snow White. And then he's like, "I'm going to start Disneyland." And newspapers were calling it Disney's folly. Everything's going to fail. You're going to ruin your company. And he said, "Watch me," right? Like, and I think that's just pretty cool. And so that's kind of my passion there. And I kind of want to touch back on something. I don't think I
Yeah.
answered your art
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I doodle. I am not an artist. So the very first one I doodled, uh, but now because we're as big as we are and we have a certain style, I doodle and then I definitely work with artists.
Yep.
And we use screen printers. Like I use professional artists.
Okay.
The main one we use is actually in Australia, and then we use like a local screen printer and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
your
Yeah,
designer's great. He does a lot of great stuff. I follow him now as well, and like just because I just love what you guys have created. But and it's very similar. It's a lot easier, and I'm pretty sure like at least based on what I've researched and what I know a lot of you come up with a lot of the ideas, and we'll kind of talk about creative process. But
yeah,
one of the things that I enjoy about is that and it sounds very similar to what I do. Like I have like a notebook, I'll doodle what I envision, what I see as what it is, and then I give
yeah.
it to the designer, have that conversation, and kind of even maybe shoot them a picture and be like, "Hey, this is what I'm kind of envisioning." And then they
Hmm.
kind of put their style because obviously they understand your brand now. So then you
Yeah,
kind of create that that there's kind of like a ebb and flow of what about this, and like I like that, and then you kind of can
100%.
do it that way. And then sometimes because my big thing is I never want to waste a designer's time. So, but sometimes I'll tell them like, hey, if you want to put a pass at this is what I'm envisioning, or like this is the catchphrase and this is what I think, and then they can kind of go, and then maybe we go back and forth. But my big thing is like I never want to waste their time, especially if I have already a vision in my head. So I totally
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely we do the same thing and I don't really want to waste your time yet.
Yeah.
The same, right? So I'll sketch something out, kind of an idea. Sometimes it comes like in the middle of the night. You're like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this would be a cool idea." And when we talk about creative process, we can get in all that, but um I don't want to waste their time too. So there have been times where I'm like, "Hey, this is, my sketch. This is what I'm thinking." And because I don't want to keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and having 85 revisions. Sometimes I'll just have to go, this one's not working. Like, I'm going to pay you for your time. I'm going to pay you for what you did. That's the final design we came up with. And so we've actually designed, there's probably, I think, 10 things that we've designed and paid for and never came out with just because I was like, it doesn't fit
It doesn't hit.
our vibe. Yeah, it doesn't hit. It
Yeah.
doesn't,
Yeah.
maybe we'll come back to it later and try to do a redesign when I sit on it. But
Yeah.
yeah, same. I don't want to waste their time.
Yeah.
So
No, I totally get
yeah,
that. Okay,
yeah,
so you talked about Disney. I gotta ask the Disney question, the Disneyland question. So,
yeah,
what's your go-to Disney ride in Disneyland? Do you have like a go-to that's like this is my like
yeah,
I gotta hit like my
yeah.
top two or three that I always got to do?
Yeah, so I am a rope drop person. So anytime I
Okay.
go to the park, I do rope drop. I can get into all that if you want me to, but I do rope drop, and the very first ride that I hit is Indiana Jones.
Okay.
So like my top, I would say at Disneyland, my top that I'm like, if I ride rides and I'm only here for a day, the ones that I have to hit Indiana Jones, Thunder Mountain, Matterhorn. Probably I'll try the log ride, Bayou Adventure, I think it
Yep.
is now,
Yep. Yep.
just because I love it. And I've heard the track didn't change, it's just different theme,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
still going to be a fun ride. Um, and then Pirates. And I think from that, everything else is extra. But those are my go-to in Disneyland.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
Ones that you enjoy in Disney World? I'm assuming I know you definitely go to Disneyland way more
Yeah.
often than Disney World.
Yeah, Disney World, I will admit, I've been to 3 times, and I can admit, um, it's not my favorite. Out of the parks, to me, it's just too big, and it doesn't have that like theme park feel. But there are still some really cool ones. The Pandora,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep.
one, it's
At
like
Animal
breathing. I was
Kingdom.
like
Yeah,
this,
it's pretty awesome.
yeah, I was like that's actually really cool. I'm trying to think what else is there that's different. I haven't been since the Tron coaster
Yeah.
opened, but that looks
Yep.
really cool, and I know that I would really dig that. Um, Trying to think what else is there? I mean, it's all the similar rides.
Yeah, it's all
Uh,
similar. There's a lot of things in California that don't Orlando doesn't have, and that's the part that makes me sad because
yeah,
you have Oswald and you have all the Marvel stuff. And
that's true.
obviously
You're
the
getting some
Star
Marvel, right?
Wars. No, we have no Mar. We have very little. The only
Interesting.
Marvel we have is
Okay.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
is what we have, because
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not allowed to have, because Universal has all that stuff in
Oh, that's
California.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's that whole synergy of the two of them. Um,
Yeah.
so you guys are celebrating 4 years in November, right? This in November of 2024, 4 years.
So we actually celebrated 4 years. I believe it was September.
Okay.
So we have something else special coming up.
Yeah.
That's the fourth year of doing it. But our 4 year was actually in September, October-ish area.
Okay.
We had to pick a date because we were like, we don't have an official
Yeah.
date. But there, yeah, we made some cool, we call it a legacy tee that had all our cool designs, like our
Yeah.
biggest designs on the back.
I freaked
Yeah.
out
And
when I
then like a
saw that,
second.
because it was like nine. I think it was like nine. How many designs is it? Like nine designs on the back.
Uh, 3, 6, 7, yeah, nine. Yeah,
Yeah,
nine.
something like that. And
Yeah.
all I thought about, I cringed when I saw it, because it's so many different colors, and I was like, "Holy moly, how many colors is this?" Because it's
I
like
think it's,
almost all your main designs, like for the, it almost looked like,
yeah,
on it. It was, I mean, it
uh,
was great looking, but I
nine.
was like, "Wow."
Yeah. It's also nine colors.
Yeah.
And when I went to the screen printer and talked to them. And they have, I mean, it's work for them, but they have like two huge, I think they're 10 head
Yeah.
automatic printers. Um, and I went to them and he was like, thank you. I actually had to kind of change the coloring, I think, of the Jungle Cruise one and another one, because that would have made it like 11 colors. So I had to change the coloring a little bit just to make sure we could get it all on there. Um, but I was like, might cost us a little bit more, but I want to do something really cool that not a
Yeah.
lot of people would do because it's so many colors.
Correct. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
I totally agree with that, and I thought it was fantastic. So you mentioned other brands, and I kind of want to talk about a little bit about competition and on those type of
Hmm.
things. So obviously, you know something about competition because of the fact that,
Yeah.
like, there's other brands dedicated to the mouse. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys differentiate, which I know you kind of mentioned it, but I also want to know about, there's there's got to be a little bit of difficulty. Like, I'm in a world where I'm obviously, yes, like there's brands like Johnny Cupcakes and other brands that are food related,
Hmm.
but I'm the only sandwich, really, this only real sandwich brand that I know of. So
Yeah.
I guess, so I don't really have competition in the sense of, like, I may have brands that create a t-shirt that's a sandwich or something, but it's not my brand in that sense. My question is more the fact of, you're constantly having to create and constantly having to produce things and come up with ideas, and then sometimes, and then you have all these competitors that are doing something similar, and at the same time, like, how do you guys keep your focus while at the same time not trying to play the game of comparison, where you're like, oh, they just did that and I wanted to do that, or I had an idea similar to that? Because a lot of times, and we'll talk about my next thing about more about that, but I'm like, how do you guys can deal with that aspect of the competition, and at the same time trying to keep that focus of, like, I'm going to keep my focus and stay to my brand, and at the same time look at what other people are doing?
Yeah. That's a really difficult um, thing to do, because in the world of it, I feel like we are a Disney company and there's other brands that do something similar. But I'll just call them out. There's not call them out, but Glad Racket is one that does kind of an alternative thing, but their theming is more dark. So like I would say hardcore, more metal type thing. And then you have the Lost Bros, who are probably our biggest competitor, um, who do a punk rock thing, but they're
Yeah.
so big that they appeal now. They've changed back when we started, they were more punk rock. They've changed
Yeah.
now their business model, and they do more generic. Um, every now and then they'll come out with something that's like punk rock princess or
Yeah.
whatever. But I would say in that we are the only kind of punk pop, and we stick to our guns there. Now that being said, it's difficult, and I'm sure you can say I compare myself all the time. I follow a ton of brands just to kind of keep my eye on things because there's been a couple times where I'm like, that design looks pretty familiar. So I try to keep my eye out there. But I mean, even a company that has like 400 followers that just starting out, sometimes they'll come out with something, and I'll be like, oh, it's so good. And then I know all it takes is like one design to become big. So I try to work on this. I'm a very competitive person. But even small brands that don't have a huge following, um, I view as competition,
Yeah.
right? And talking to my buddies, they're like, no, they're not competition. You're way bigger, this and that. But there is one brand coming up now. They do different things, but I feel like we've kind of inspired the punk pop uh, type thing. So now
Yeah.
there's some brands coming up that will brand themselves as alternative Disney designs. When they post things, they're using punk pop music and all that type of thing. So those ones I really keep an eye on because I'm like, okay, now you're really in on our turf. But the whole comparison thing, I think it's or competition thing, I think it's good.
Yeah.
Because if you get to a certain point where you're like, uh, I'm not competitive. I'm not comparing myself to anybody else. We're doing our thing. I'm like, great for you. Don't compare yourself. That's healthy. That's awesome. The competitive part, though, I think that keeps you on edge, right? It constantly keeps me going, how can I improve this brand? What else can we do? And like try to see trends and just kind of keep on that path because we create, I would say, new designs a month. So right now we don't, or this past year anyway, we don't do a ton of like reprints, which really puts a lot of stress on us, especially with everything we have going on. But to stay relevant and fresh and kind of go, this is how we're different from these people, is we're able to do three designs a month. We were doing four, but my wife's working on her master's and finishing that up. And she was like, please, can we just dial it back? So we do three new designs a month. And I think the only other brand that's constantly pumping something like that out is the Lost Bros. And so the Lost Bros are very East Coast and we're
Yeah.
very West Coast.
That makes sense.
Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's definitely a good comparison on that.
yeah,
Um, for sure. What when you're doing your releases, obviously I've been following you guys for a while, but my question is when you do the releases, the three a month, is it, and obviously they're not, it's not like a series, so a lot of times they're not a series, it may be, sometimes they could be some things interconnecting like your Mary Poppins and then now your Bert one, like kind of,
yeah,
like that type of synergy. But like,
yeah.
do you have like, what is it that kind of like hits where you're like, we're gonna do, this is what we're thinking of for this month, like we're thinking this is it, and we can kind of go towards the creative side of things, like how are you guys like planning this thing like months in advance, like hey, this is what I think we should do for this month around this time frame? Or is ideas, you have ideas that you jot down and you're like, hey, I'm going back to this and I'm like, ooh, this would be really good for this,
Hmm.
and do that? Like how is that process kind of where you're kind of because I'll admit for me, like I'm thinking for my next year, I'm thinking I'm gonna do like more theme based, where it's like my
Mm,
releases are gonna be more themed versus it like, and released together like like one or like two or three designs that are fully themed versus doing where I sometimes will be like, here's a sandwich themed shirt, like a sports themed one, and here's this and here's that, and just
yeah.
generic. And that's just because I'm trying to do something different. But I'm kind of curious like on how you guys do it, or what your thought process is when you guys how to do like, hey, we got to do three a month.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So we sort of fly by the seat of our pants, but at the beginning of each year and a couple of times throughout the year, we'll try to look at a calendar. So an example would be we did a Mary Poppins 60th anniversary. So that's something that we knew at the beginning of the year we were going to need to design. We had an Outlands one that we released, I think,
Mhm.
on the 30 year of Lion King. And so we'll search for things like that. And so at the beginning of the year, I'll kind of be like, okay, these are things that I specifically need to design, but right now, we don't really have anything themed that we do. Like we'll try to come out with some stuff that seems a little more summery, during the summer. And then obviously during like October is going to be more Haunted Mansion style spooky things. And
Yeah.
then we're not doing anything Christmas this year, but during the holidays, we'll do more of that. But I don't like to be create I don't like my creativity limited.
Yeah.
Um, so I just kind of design. I have a list. I actually have a list on my phone, and then when I work out, because I have a gym in my garage, when I work out in there, I have a whiteboard, and so I'll just start writing a whole bunch of stuff in there. And then when I need a design, I'll just kind of go through and see what fits, and or I'll see a piece of art and I'll be like, okay, that's the path that we're going. But I mean, similar to you, it's only right now it's November, beginning of November. I'm already designing for like February.
Yeah.
I'm already in that, and I already know I need to do stuff for Christmas because we didn't do any this year. So I've already compiled a list. So to kind of go back to it, we look at the calendar, see if there's anything's highlighted. But we don't do too much of that because, in my opinion, every brand does that, right? Like every brand during Halloween, ooh, Haunted Mansion this.
Yeah.
Oh, every brand during Christmas, here's all our Christmas gear and all that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't want to do that. I
Yeah.
don't want to come out with a Valentine's Day thing just because it's Valentine's Day. I don't
Yeah.
want to come out with a green t-shirt because it's St. Patrick's Day. Like I want to stick to our brand, and we're, I would say, a little more punk rock, right? And I'm like, I'm not going to conform to
Yeah.
your
Not conforming to it.
holiday schedule. Yeah, I'm just going to do my own thing. And if you like it, you like it. And then if not, yeah,
No, I love that. And I agree. Like I could see totally looking into things such as that, like certain milestone anniversaries, maybe certain rides that are going to open up or something like that,
yeah,
or movies that
yeah,
you may know of that you have like, "Ooh, this would be kind of good for us to be able to do." I
yeah,
could see that being, a trend on where you kind of lead to and kind of go to it. Which I definitely, and I appreciate the fact that you do very similar. I have notebooks, like I have notebooks that I doodle in. I have my phone as well, that I do stuff on. And then I'm like, I'm always constantly just trying to figure things out. I sometimes will do, I'll kind of sometimes go just when I go for walks, I'll just try to like think about like, okay, what is it that I have? And sometimes, and I don't know if it's for you like this, like you have certain ideas where maybe it's like the phrase comes first, or like the
hmm,
visual, like or sometimes you have like a phrase and you're like, ooh, that's a good phrase, like that's a good tagline, and then I can
yeah,
then go to the visual, or you're like, ooh, this would be a good visual. Like I will say, one of my favorite ideas that you guys had, the backside of water for Jungle Cruise, like I think
hmm,
very very clever, idea, and I think it's very very smart what you guys have done with that. Um,
appreciate it.
I am curious with you in the idea of printing is you guys do a tri blend, you do a hoodie, and you also do a regular type shirt. Like,
Yeah,
how difficult is that when you're creating? I mean, and obviously, congratulations if you figured it out on like the art of, and I know you do some pre-orders and stuff like that, but congratulations if figuring out like what what sizing and all that stuff, because
ugh,
that is an animal, that is a beast that I'm still trying to figure out. I've been doing
yeah,
this for 11 years and I'm still trying to figure out. I'm like, yeah, I
yeah,
ordered too many extra larges on this one.
yep.
What made you decide to go tri blend regular, and also obviously I know why you do the hoodies now, but why like the mix of that and then also some kids shirts
Yeah.
as well, which is another animal that's hard to
Hmm.
climb sometimes.
Yeah, so we haven't always offered that. When we first started out, it was t-shirts and hoodies, and not every design um, we do in a hoodie, right? So most of the time it's t-shirts. So for a long while, I feel like this past year we just started doing the double style t-shirt. So for a long while it was just tri-blend, and every now and then we'd have a hoodie. We dabbled uh, in kids, um, but we switched to the cotton just because talking to some of the people that have bought our things and doing polls and things like that, we have found that the tri-blend can be a little more athletic fitting. And for uh, say some larger people,
Biggie
they don't
size
like
people
how
like me.
it clings, right?
Correct.
And so I was like, well, I want everybody to feel included. This isn't a brand that's like, this is a t-shirt that we come out with. So I then looked into cotton t-shirts, and it seemed like Comfort Colors was a really popular one. For a cotton, it doesn't shrink a whole ton
Yep.
once you get it, and the Tri-Blend doesn't shrink a whole ton when you get it either. And the reason that I did that and we stick to the types of t-shirts that we have is because I want you to know what you're getting so you don't have to guess about sizing. And then I don't want you to have to be like, oh, I got an extra large, but then I washed it and it
Yep.
shrunk. Now I have to
Yep.
get a 2X and things
Yeah.
like that. So We stuck to it that way. There's some other brands, and I won't name them,
Yeah,
but there's some larger brands that choose a different blank depending on what's cheaper. And I don't like that because as a consumer,
I
is
like
it a Gildan? Is
consistency.
it a Comfort Colors? Right? Like
Yeah,
they're very, very different. So
correct.
we stick to that. We kind of branched out. It's a little more work on our end, just because now you got to keep track of three things and possibly four. We also started doing another thing that I don't know a lot of brands are doing, and I'm sure you're aware. Like when they make a screen, they have to make it fit all sizes, right? So most of the time it's based off a small, maybe a medium, because you're like, okay, it'll fit on small, large. And I noticed as you got to larger sizing, you have like a 4X t-shirt with a print this big. And so I was like, I don't like that. I want our products, no matter what size you have, to be the best, right? That's what I'm all about. And so it costs a little more on our end, but what we do is small through large gets one set of screens, and then extra large through 4X gets another set. That way they all look good. That way you have a 4X with like a nice large
Yeah.
print on it and nothing looks crazy. And it's taken some trial and error, with like front prints and things like that. Um, but we just wanted to do that. The sizing wise, what works and what doesn't, we actually have a spreadsheet of what we've ordered each time. Uh, but I'll tell you this, once you think you figured it out, you don't, right? No matter what you order, it's wrong, right? No matter what you've ordered. So we actually have to kind of dial it in because it's not different every time. It kind of goes through these weird waves.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, recently we were selling a ton of 2X. And so we were ordering a ton of those. And then for whatever reason, 2X's
Yep.
dropped. And
Hmm.
we were sitting with like stacks of 2X t-shirts. So as far as sizing goes, I we
Yep.
don't have a
Yep.
formula. We just kind of know what we order, and we kind of have a standing order. We go with that, and then we see what sells and adjust. Yeah,
Uh, are there things? I'm just kind of curious if I'm in the same boat or not.
yeah,
Are there moments when you have like a design, you're like, holy cow, this is it. Like, this is another banger.
yeah,
I'm gonna like, and then all of a sudden, like, it comes, and then you're like, you go and you're like, it does not do what you think, or you have one that you're like, yeah, I kind of like this, and then that one blows up. Like, have you had moments like that where
yeah,
it's like the unexpected or what you expect? Because obviously not all of them. I will say, like, you guys put a lot of thought and detail into it, so I do appreciate the fact that it does not, your designs, I can say it as a brand owner, your designs never feel watered down in the sense where it's like rushed, where I feel like you marinated enough where you kind of like, there's the little details in it,
yeah,
you could tell you took the time, as opposed to like a rush. I want to post something like every week, or I got to do something like,
yeah,
all the time, where then it's like a more of a rushed idea. But I'm also kind of curious on, like, when you have those, like, have you had those moments where you're like, wow, I really thought, kind of like sizing, like, I really thought this was going to like hit with the audience, but it didn't do as well as I thought.
yeah.
Then, when it comes, like, what have you done with those, or how do you handle some of that?
Um, that's hard. I take I take everything personally, right? Like this brand
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
my baby, and it is a 7 day a week, 24/7 type thing. I'm always thinking about it. Um, as far as like watered down designs, things like that, I appreciate that because um, we do our best to design way ahead of time. But there's sometimes where, like, let's say maybe the outlets, for example, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's like that deadline's coming up where we have to order because we order our shirts wholesale, get those to the printer, and they send it back.
Yep.
Where we're like, it's coming up, like you need to figure something out. Um, but uh, I won't put something out that I'm not happy with. And believe it or not, I've actually used a designer and came up with a concept and was like, okay, okay, yeah, it didn't turn out how I thought it would. And then, like a week goes by and my brain's constantly thinking about that design. Then I go, okay, I'm gonna hit up one of our other designers and I'm like, hey, if you're comfortable with it, like this is what they created, this is my vision, what can you do with it? Uh, and I did that, believe it or not. I think it was like with our third Soren design.
Hmm.
It's like a Soren World Tour, just a front print. We had something, it had like a hooked uh, Eiffel Tower on it, right? And had, bright colors and things like that. And I was just like, it just feels not like us too much. So I went with another guy to see what he could do, and he sent it to me, and I was like, that looks awesome. Like, I love it. It's this kind of like vintagey looking, just one single color print, distressed, Soren. It's got all the locations, got a world tour. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this is like a band shirt,
Yeah.
and I put it on Pepper to give it that like vintage t-shirt, cracked kind of ink look, and it's like a faded black. And I was like, yeah, people love Soren. This is a cool design. Uh, and that one, like, honestly, I think was up there with the worst performers. And that messes with me. I don't know how it is with you,
Oh, it
but
messes
it
with me.
messes where I'm like, okay, I was way wrong. What else am I wrong about? What other designs have I come out with now, or I'm going to come out with that I'm wrong about,
Yeah.
So it messes with that. So my wife and I have a lot of conversations sometimes, and I'm very thankful that we've created this like village that we have where I can send my concepts to these people, and
Yeah.
I'll be like, what do you
Yeah.
think of
What do
this?
you think? Yeah.
And yeah, and sometimes they're like, that's a freaking banger, or they're like, it doesn't really feel like you guys. And thankfully, one of them, she used to be a graphic designer herself, and I'm like, well, what can I do? What can I do to change this? Because I'm at a loss right now, but I think something's there. So she'll kind of help out, toss out some ideas, which helps you refine some things. But
Yeah.
uh, it's hard. I mean, there are definitely some that you think are going to hit, like the Oswald one. So the
Mhm.
first Oswald we have, I keep trying to force Oswald down people's throats. So the first one we had said the Lucky Rabbit. He's like painting the letters. Half of them are blue, like his pants. I'm like, gonna be great. Didn't sell well. And I think a year later, I was like, okay, no luck club, right? I'm like, okay, this one looks cool. It's kind of like a Misfits looking thing, kind of a grumpy Oswald on there. Didn't sell well either. So you learn, you're like, okay, no Oswald. Like people say they want it, but
Yeah.
when you give it to them, you're like, they don't.
Yeah.
And for ones that hit, um, there's things that you're like, this is a really cool design. I think this one will be popular, like the Thunder Mountain one that we had with like the goat says Thunder. I
Hmm.
was like, it's cool design. I'm like, it's not the greatest thing we've ever done in the world, but I was like, I'm happy with how that looks. And I think it's going to be a solid design. And we came out with t-shirts and hoodies, and they were sold out in like 10 minutes. And you're like, holy cow. Okay, let's do a reprint. And boom, sold out in 10 minutes. And you're like, what is happening? And another one that I was really stoked about that I'm happy took off was our Small World, like world tour and all the locations that you go on Small
Yeah.
World. That one, I think we had to reprint 5 or 6 times before you did a reprint and it like kind of fizzled. And you're like, okay, we've hit our max with that. But you never know. I think that's kind of what's fun about
No.
this business is
Yeah.
like, you never know.
Well, and I think it's fun, and at the same time, it is nerve wracking because obviously,
Yeah.
I look at it as, I mean, it's money you're spending and you're buying
Yeah.
product, so it's like a
Yeah.
lot of times it's not like you can just like, so you're like, oh, this is my idea, I'm going to go with it, and so sometimes when it does hit and you're like, yeah, I love it, and then other times it's like, oh, what a bust. I was like, and what am I going to do with this now? So I totally feel you and understand, when you're kind of doing some of that and having to deal with, will it, won't it, type of thing. One thing that you do a really good job on, and obviously, like you said, you do think about it. It's always 7 days a week, always thinking about it. You do a really good job on social. I love the fact that, you do a good job on it, but it's a lot of work. It's
Okay.
exhausting and a lot of
Yeah.
work. I'm just by myself, so it's like it's just me doing it. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of curious a little bit about, like, what are some tips or advice that you would give brand owners, because that's something that I know obviously has helped your brand as well, your interaction and how you guys are social wise. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious, do you have any tips or tricks on what people can do on social media, and what's something that works or doesn't work for you, or you think, hey, like, these are things that I would recommend someone who's trying to, like, help their brand grow, or at least your product or something to that effect?
Yeah, I mean, to be like generic at first, like when I'm on TikTok or anything, I'm kind of watching TikTok, but I'm looking for things that I can I'm looking for trends, videos that I'm seeing like, oh, this is the same audio used over and over. I think this is going to be a trend. And then I go, how can I tweak this for my brand? So you hop on the trend, you use the trending audio. Um, but what I tried to do and advice that I got as well starting out is you try to be as authentic as possible, right? So I'm not putting anything out that I don't think is funny, right? So I'm not just doing a trend to do a trend, like I'm using audios and I'm on screen. I think starting out, you have to get uncomfortable, right? Like just the world that we're in. Like I'm
Yep.
doing podcasts. I don't like to be on camera, believe it or not. I don't like talking to the public. Like I don't like all these things, but as a brand owner, you have to do those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get comfortable or uncomfortable, get out of your comfort zone. And another thing that I do that it takes a lot, but I wanted to create a community and not have, people are like, oh, you can have automated DMs. So when someone messages you, it kicks back something automatically. Um, and it's something that people have kept telling me to do because we get so many messages and I'm on my phone day and night. And my wife's like, hey, man,
Get off.
why don't you get off the phone? Like, figure this out.
Yeah.
So I try to set limits there, but I do my best to respond to everybody, and I do my best to have like honest conversations. I respond to comments, I respond to
Yeah.
DMs. I do all that because we wanted to create something that's like we're not a brand, like we're people, right? We're not this big conglomerate. Like you get to know me, and I think that's one of the things why you wanted to do a podcast with us is because us as a brand because through me you're
Yeah.
like they seem well, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but they seem like really cool
Yeah.
people and
No,
somebody I would want to talk to, right?
exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, as a brand owner, if you can too, like if you're not a photographer, uh I mean we started out doing our own photos and doing our own modeling. But I was like, visually, I want things to be just a little bit better. And it all takes money and it's all very difficult at the beginning. But if you feel like you have a solid idea and you are passionate about it, like truly passionate about it, it's going to be worth it because we now use photographers that take product photos, people that are comfortable in front of the camera, they know angles and things like that. So visually, people seeing our t-shirts, it's better. And then just getting on reels and then being in front of the camera and as weird as it sounds, you have to pay attention to analytics. You have to pay attention to how things are performing. And you're like, okay, I did this at this time of day, that wasn't working. And I did that at this time of day, and I got 40,000 views. So this type of content is what people want to see right now. And right now we're going through a lull. If I'm going to be honest, we're going through a lull because the algorithm and everything has changed. So right when you think you have it figured out,
It changes.
it's changed, right? So you have to pay attention to that, and that's why it's just 24/7. You just have to pay attention to things and see what works and doesn't work. And then the last thing I would say is be willing to fail because you're going to, right? You're going to come out with things, you can come out with ideas, videos, t-shirts, whatever it is that you're doing. And especially at the beginning, you're going to fail and you're going to fail a lot and it's going to be hard. But like I said, if you're truly, truly passionate about your idea and you think something's there, just stick with it and keep going after it because it gets better day by day.
So you brought up a topic, and it was perfect because it transitions to one of the things that I'm curious of, because it takes a lot of trust. Because one, you're in Oregon. Obviously,
Yeah.
the parks, you take a lot of photos, and a lot of times you take the photos at Disneyland and the parks and stuff like that. So you have photographers doing all that. There's a huge level of one, got to be a huge level of trust, a huge level of communication. Because it's not like you're going every single time you do a release. You're not the one flying out. I doubt you're flying every month to
No.
California. So you're sending it out to your photographer. You may have models that you or have, or your photographer has models. So there's a lot of communication and stuff like that. How does all that kind of work? Like, do you have some vision of like, hey, I think this would be a good spot. I think you should do it somewhere around here. This is what I want, what I'm envisioning. Or is it at a point where you have such a level of confidence and relationship with your photographer where it's like I can just send them stuff. They know what we want and they're basically understanding our vision? Or how does that whole process work? Because I'm not, I have a love hate with photo shoots. I love my
Yeah.
models because obviously I'm the one that finds them. I love my photographer. However, it's stressful to me. Are they
Yeah.
going to be there? Is it going to cancel? What's the weather going to be like? Trying to get everybody organized. Who's available? Who's not available? So I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, like you're adding an extra layer because you're not even there. And you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And then someone else is doing it. So I'm kind of curious on like, how do you handle that aspect of it?
Um, uh, Basically, I view it um, as a business owner, I'm a manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm managing artists, I'm managing photographers, models, like whoever else is helping us, the website guy. Where it gets slightly complicated is that anybody that we bring into this, like the website guy is like actually our neighbor, my wife's best friend's husband, who used to have a clothing brand but also happens to do web design. So we only bring people in that we trust and believe in the brand.
Yeah.
Like the photographers that we use one in Las Vegas, and then we use another guy in California who does stuff in the park. They both have followed us for a long time, and I looked through their stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna give you a shot, right? Like people are like, I want to work with you. I want to work with you.
Yeah.
And so I'm picky and choosy, right? Like I'm the business owner. And I mean, I don't know if you can swear in here, but you have to be a hard ass at
Yeah.
points. And so with the Vegas photographer, initially, we sent her stuff and I was like, this is what I'm envisioning. This is what our brand is. Like if you have models with tattoos, things like that. And you have to be willing to, when they send you photos, go, no, that's not at all. And that's hard because these people become your friends. So it's like basically telling your friend, like, I'm not really digging that.
Yeah.
And it's constantly evolving, right? Like our photographer in Vegas, we had to have some conversations because I kind of started using a dude in California. There were feelings that were kind of hurt there. So you're like managing that whole situation. And then it's like, their style or whatever, they're doing more studio. It looks more um, kind of move towards more like family portrait style. And I had to be like, that's not us. I want you, like, I had to be like, I want you to not shoot in studio anymore. I want you outside in Vegas, find graffiti walls, find skate parks, find those things. And if you have a good enough relationship with them, they're like, great, yeah, I'll do that, no
Yeah.
problem. And there's no feelings that are hurt, right? If you're just open and honest about stuff and not rude about it, they're good. And you also have to be willing to make tough, tough decisions. So I recently was using a buddy of mine. He's doing photos and things like that in California. And I was like, I'm so burnt out right now. I was like, I can't, just with everything we have going on, I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. And he and his wife, we're like, well, we also manage social medias. We do that. And I was like, great, whatever it is you want. Like, I don't want to give you full access to our page just because I'm very protective of stuff. But I was like, you create things, find trends, whatever it is, send it to me. Tell me when to post, give me a schedule, and I'll do all that. And while the videos and the styles that I was telling him to do, things weren't necessarily hitting how I was wanting them to. So I had to change. Um, kind of what he was doing there. And then I noticed like engagement and all these things on our social media started to drop. And after a month, I had to like, and thankfully he's a pretty cool dude.
Yeah.
But I had to be like, I'm going to take back over. Like this isn't working. And I'm not liking the direction that things are going. So I'll still use him for photos and things like that every now and then. And I was noticing when we were doing more like those park type photos versus the Vegas one, those photos were getting less engagement than the Vegas photographer, um, which is weird, but it's all these things that you have to pay attention to. And so I
Well,
was like,
and,
okay,
and I could see to a degree that, right? Because like you kind of want to blend, right? You want to blend of, hey, my stuff is, punk pop in the parks, but then
yeah,
you also have like the thing that's great about your brand is, and what I've heard other people talk about is that the stuff you make, you actually want to wear outside the parks. So
yeah,
like regular lifestyle wear of like, hey, I want to wear this because it's cool, and then you're like, oh, that's
yeah,
cool. That's like it's a haunted mansion or whatever, and type of stuff, and like, or and things like that. So yeah, so I could totally see that where it's like you want to blend a mix of, outside wear, like, regular day-to-day lifestyle wear, and as well as also some stuff that shows the parks in there, because obviously there is a magical element to your brand.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you got to find out what works, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, going back to it all, like you have to be able to have tough conversations. You have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to possibly hurt feelings by saying no. But at the end of the day, right, like it's your brand.
Hmm.
And these people are essentially working for you. So you're managing them, right? Like if you were a manager at a store and something's not performing how you wouldn't just go, well, they're a friend of mine, so I'm just going to let them do their thing. You have to be willing to do that. And that's one of the hard parts about owning the business is kind of having some tough conversations.
It's kind of funny because you hit, like, as my transition questions, because that was going to be one of my questions. What's the hardest part about
It's
running
like
the
a new.
brand that many people don't realize? And that is definitely one of them. Is there
That
anything
is one
else?
of them.
Anything else, that any other big one that's like a thorn that people just don't understand or realize when they have, like, as people running a brand?
Uh, I hate how much time you got, right?
Uh, uh,
Yeah. But I think one that people don't realize, especially for small brands, and I'm sure you do the same, we're very fortunate. So when we do a release, we get a lot of orders. And it's not a team, right? If you look at our following and you look at our page, you're like, oh, they've got people that work for them. We don't, right? Like we manage some photographers, we manage some artists, and then it's my wife and I and our neighbor come over and we pack, right? So
yeah.
like last Black Friday, we were very fortunate, had a successful Black Friday. It took us 3 days, 3 loads to the post office, filling my car, post office. And so what I don't think people realize sometimes, especially for a small business, is don't necessarily message them like 2 days later
Hey,
and
where's
be
my
like,
stuff?
where's, yeah, or if the post office loses your package,
Yep.
they want us to do something, and you're like,
Yep.
and as a business, you're like, okay, do I potentially piss this person off and say, not my problem. The post office lost it. You got to
Yeah.
file a thing with them with insurance and all that, or do I just give them a free T-shirt to try to make up for it? But I think that's one thing that people don't realize is like if you let's say you have 300 orders to pack, you're like, shit, that's going to take me forever to pack, and I have to do that on top of my
The regular
schedule and
life.
raising a
Yeah.
family and like
Yeah.
all that. So that
Yeah.
takes a while. So I think that's one that people don't necessarily realize that things just take a little bit longer. We're not Amazon, right? Like
Yeah. No, I love that.
things will get out. Yeah,
That hits. That hits. So I got one last question, and then I'll
yeah,
tell for you to be able to share things with folks. What
for
advice?
sure.
And I know you kind of mentioned some of this with the social, but what advice would you have for someone wanting to start something?
Wanting to start something, I would say have a pretty solid concept of what your idea is, nothing vague, and then don't jump into it too soon. Like, do your research. Try to do some market research of like my buddy is actually getting ready to start a product, or something that he's making, and he talked to like a venture capitalist, and he was like, you need to have like a viable product concept and like a product. You have to have proof of concept, and so I'd say don't start big. Like if you're going to come up with a t-shirt company, have something that's unique, right? Don't just be like, oh, I'm going to make Disney t-shirts. Like you need to do research of like what's not out there. Like what niche can I do that's not out there that I can take over because things are
Yeah.
so saturated. Um, and then yeah, just do your research, and then I would say start on an Etsy and see if things sell. See if you can even sell anything, because if you can't, there's no point in uh, paying for a website and printing up a whole bunch of shirts because then you're going to sit on it. So I'd
Yeah.
say be patient with it, do your research, see what's out there and what niche, and then honestly, I'd say wait a month. If you're passionate about it and you're still thinking about it every single day and you're like, yeah, this is something I want to do. I've done my research. That niche is not there for whatever it is you're going to be doing. And it's a month later and I'm still as passionate about it as I was a month ago, go for it. But if it's this fleeting, because you see it all the time, right? People are like, I'm going to start a t-shirt brand. And then they get into it and go, it's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. This is
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah.
And then their brand disappears. So I'd say give it time and do your research. And if you're passionate about it, go for it. And like I said, you're going to fail. But if you're passionate about it, do not stop. Just keep driving and eventually you'll get lucky.
before we go, and I know I'm gonna ask you like how people can follow you and stuff like that, but I definitely
Hmm.
be remiss to ask because I know my episode's evergreen, but we kind of talked about it because you mentioned that every year you've had different forms of like a design that goes to like charity or like a good does some goodness, and you also mentioned that this year you're not doing like a traditional holiday themed shirt, but I do want you to talk about it because I see the hoodie. I plan to pre-order one because
Yeah,
I do love the idea of it. But I want you to kind of talk about it because it'll be on the social as people are watching and
yeah,
listening to this. They probably will see it on the social on the Lunch with Biggie and then also on your Flying House Threads Instagram. But can you tell people a little bit about the idea, where the idea came from?
yeah.
And what it is and what it's for, just because I definitely think it's a great cause and something that everyone should kind of know about and be able to look forward to.
Yeah. So when we first started out with the brand, especially because we don't need the money, I was like, during the holiday season, I want to be able to do something that helps people out. And so the first year, it was during lockdown, the parks were closed. We actually came out with the design to raise money for the cast member pantry. And that was like something that cast members that were out of work could go to this building that was the cast member pantry and they could get food because they had no money, they weren't working, they didn't know when they were going to go back to work. So we were able to donate a little bit to that. The next year, as we were growing, um, there was an artist that we were currently working with at that time, and I was just talking to him, and he was like, mentioned something about medical bills. And I was like, well, tell me more about that. And his daughter at the time needed like speech therapy, physical therapy, and another type of therapy. And I was like, okay, what is it that you need? And he needed one of those kind of like a sensory swing for his
Yeah.
daughter. And those are $500. And I was like, okay, well, this is idea I have for a design. You draw that design. We're going to market it as pre-sale and you get all the money, right? 100% of the net profits are going to go to you. So we were able to do that and um, get him the swing plus some to help them out with all the bills that they had. And so that really, really sparked like, okay, we're able to do something with this platform. And so the following year, I was like, I want to do a Main Street firehouse design because as a firefighter myself, I get to go do stair climbs. Like over here, it's a Portland stair climb, Seattle stair climb, and it's to raise money for leukemia and lymphoma. So I wanted to tie in something with my job and my love for Disney. And so I did a Main Street firehouse design as a pre-sale. But some more background on that is my wife's sibling unfortunately had leukemia twice. So right when they kicked it the first time, like a year later, leukemia came back. Thankfully, they're in remission. They're still in remission. But we knew that that's not everybody's story, and we saw how hard that struggle was for families and everything that goes into it. It's a long process that they have to go through. It takes a toll on the family. So I was like, okay, we're going to do something that helps out leukemia and lymphoma. That's our charity we're going to donate to, and then we're going to tie in Main Street Firehouse, especially at Disneyland, because the first one we did was Engine Company 55, right? So Disneyland opened in 1955. Main Street Firehouse, Walt's apartment was above it. So I'm like, I'm going to tie all that in. We're going to do pre-sale, donate it. So we did that the first year. The second year, I changed it. I was like, this is only going to be something that you can do during the pre-sale. We're going to use our platform because we're continuing to grow, and we're just going to do this as long as we can because we never expected we'd be here as long as we were, and our brand would grow to what it is. So, second year, we're like, okay, I'm going to do a different design each year of a Main Street Firehouse. So we did that. The third year, I got some feedback from people and all our Orlando folk were like, hey, it's Engine Company 55. What about Disney World? And so at the time, I think Murphy, the dragon over here in Disneyland, the Maleficent dragon, lit on fire during a parade in Orlando. And I was like,
Yep.
that's kind of cool. Like being a firefighter, I was like, that's kind of cool. And then I didn't have a concept for the year's design, and then the dragon lit on fire during Phantasmic. And so I was like, all right, this year it's going to be the Maleficent dragon. and I'm gonna, firefighters call themselves dragon slayers all the time. So I was like, okay, dragon slayers protecting the magic, Maleficent dragon. It's gonna be Engine Company 55, Engine Company 71. We came out with that design, and I'm gonna be honest, we were able to donate $15,000, right?
Wow.
So yeah, huge. It
Wow.
was a lot of work. We were like, that's a lot. That's
That's a
bigger
lot
than
of
anything.
packing.
That's bigger than anything. We don't think we're making that kind of money because we're not. I wouldn't be a firefighter if we were making that kind of
Yep.
money. But because it's a charity and we work with different, I started to bring more people in. So this year I'm doing podcasts. I'm working with influencers, which I don't normally do. We're doing all sorts of stuff because I want it to be bigger than last year. So this year's is a Mickey Fire Brigade. And again, all that money is going to go to leukemia and lymphoma to help people with that fight. Um, and I'm hoping that we can beat last year's total.
That's
So
amazing.
that's why we're doing podcasts. I mean, it's a worthy cause, and that's honestly why we're not doing a holiday design.
Yeah.
I'm kind of grumpy in that sense of like during this time of year, you see brands come out with a whole bunch of stuff,
Yep.
right? Because it's
Yep.
all about making money on Black Friday. It's all about
Yep.
making capitalizing on Christmas. And I wanted to use our platform this year specifically. I'm not worried about that,
Yeah.
right? I don't care, right? We could make no money the rest of the year and I'm fine with that because I want this design to do so well. So that's what we're focusing on this year.
I love it.
Yeah.
How can people follow you? How can they support? How can they shop? I figure as they're listening, they're probably scrolling through their phones,
Yeah.
and doing all that. Where can they find you on all the socials, on TikTok, and all that? And obviously, it'll be on the show notes as well. But where can they find you, and where can they get all that information?
Yeah, so we keep it pretty simple. Our name is Flying House Threads. So Instagram handle is Flying House Threads, right? TikTok is the same. And then our website is flyinghousethreads.com. So we have our own website. So you can just Google us and it should bring in all our stuff, or in your search bar at the bottom, you can do flyinghousethreads.com. That's going to bring up our webpage. The design itself, the pre-sale starts November 15th and it runs probably about 5 days is what we'll do. The special thing about these teas is it not only helps a worthy cause, but you can only get them during the pre-sale. It's not something that we're going to sell afterwards, because I wanted to make it something special, like a little club. Like if you have one of these and you help donate and all that stuff. So everything is Flying House Threads. So TikTok, Instagram, our website keeps it pretty simple.
I love
Find
it.
us.
I love it.
Yeah.
Scott, it's definitely been a pleasure to finally get a chance
Yeah.
to chat with
Finally.
you.
Yeah. It's been a long
I
road.
know, I
Yeah.
know I've been DMing you and asking and wanting, and a lot of it is just because I really do admire what you guys do. I love what you guys do. It's like you guys have a really fun brand, and
Thank you.
I had a lot of questions on that aspect on competition and all those things, and I was just I thought it'd be a great way to be able to at least share and let other people know. And I think
Yeah.
you had some really good, valuable insights. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. Thank you so much for Scott from Flying House Threads for being on and having lunch with me. Definitely make sure to check them out. You'll see all the information on their social, on my social as well. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe. If you want to, support, obviously check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads, and do some shopping and tell your friends. Thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion. Thanks, everyone.